Share. Okay. So one of the things I like to start off with, because I think sometimes it's downright entertaining and sometimes it's even pertinent to maybe what we're discussing. But just curious, any wins that you've had in the last 2 weeks, or any interesting situations that you've run across, or maybe that you've never run across before, or just been a good long time. So, and this is my plead to everybody on the call. If you have at all the remote capability of turning on your video, it sure is nice talking to faces rather than just blank screens. So look at that, John, team player. Thank you. You're a handsome man. All right. So in that category, any interesting wins over the past 2 weeks? Yeah, go ahead, Joyce.
I had a fun win on Saturday. Clients showed up at my house, told me all about the remodel they're doing. They gave me an invitation as they're throwing a 50th wedding party for parents. The parents are also my clients, and they brought me an invitation and asked me to distribute some in my neighborhood because the parents live there and they wanted to have a good crowd. So as they left, they were talking as they went down my front steps and said, yeah, we're about ready we need a new garage door opener. And as you probably remember, you gave us one when we bought the house. And I said, well, one per customer, but I'm sure glad you remembered you have a great real estate agent. And my next door neighbor was just wrapping up a baby shower that she'd had in her yard. They also bought a cabin with me. And she overheard the conversation from the street and shouted, amen to that. So I closed my front door feeling like maybe my years of sending postcards and baby gifts and congratulation cards to all of my clients kind of paid off in a trifecta right there on that little conversation.
You know what? What a great story, a great reminder. And it's nice to see when not just our marketing efforts, but all of that would not happen, Joyce, and I'm not blowing smoke in your face, but if you didn't do a good job for your clients, it wouldn't matter how much marketing you did. Right. So, it's a culmination of both. So good job. In the chat, Clint says he put 3 under contract last week. Yeah, way to go, Clint. Way to be ramping it up, baby. All right. Any interesting deals that you've run across, or interesting dialogue? It doesn't have to be a deal. Interesting dialogue that come on, I know they're out there because I hear them all the time. Nope. Come on, Dee.
Matt, I want to give thanks to you for these meetings. Not anything interesting, but I have made the commitment to be on these calls. And in section 2 of the exclusive right to sell, before one of your April-May meetings, we went over the exclusive right to sell. And prior to that, I didn't put anything in the unrepresented buyer slot. Yep. I've never had an unrepresented buyer, so I didn't give it any thought or weight. And I haven't closed this deal, but I have 3 fourplexes down in Harriman and got an offer on all 3. I did put 1.5% on the unrepresented buyer. And when I realized that, I immediately called my clients and said, hey, I know I'm getting paid well. On top of that, we have another 1.5%. If we needed to discuss that, I will be happy to do so. And when I followed back up with them the next morning, they said, we're happy with it. That's in the contract and we'll honor it. So it paid off to be on these meetings and to know your contract.
Yeah, well, you know what? I've noticed that you and I've talked privately about it. I really do appreciate anybody who's committed to this. Not just because you're good people, but we're in such a cool industry, and it's not the norm. Not everybody takes the time to sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey says. Get better at our craft, bring value, add additional value, and you know what? It's kind of nice when part of that process allows us to be paid what we're worth. And if I could piggyback on your comment for a minute, Dee. So what she's talking about is in the ERS, you have section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. I'm not going to go in deep dive on that, but 2.1 is how much we get paid when we sell as the listing brokerage. 2.2 was added in December of the previous year. And it says, okay, since there's a fair amount more unrepresented buyers, and we all know that we actually do work, even though they're quote unquote unrepresented, what additional compensation are we going to be paid if that situation arises? And I just wanted to, and 2.3 is really the permission section. That's what I like to call it. Without anything in 2.3, you don't have the right to talk to an outside agent or a buyer or a prospective buyer about any compensation. It is the section that gives you the permission to talk about a cooperative compensation. Without that being signed off or an amount in there, you don't have permission to talk about it. So, but coming back to Dee's point, I hope you guys have thought through that section 2.2 and proposed dialogue, put your own spin on it or whatever. The way I would set that up with a listing with a seller is, hey, listen, because of the national settlement, not a lot of things have changed, but there is a change in the contract. We still handle things largely the same, but let me just quickly go through this after I say this is how much you're going to pay our brokerage when we sell your house, not if, when we sell your house, in 2.1. 2.2, and so much of this, guys, has to do with how you present it. I'm not proposing right here that you game your sellers. This is legitimate. How many of you have worked with an unrepresented buyer? Raise your hand.
Well, now.
Do you do any work on their behalf?
Yes.
Okay. When they have contract questions or what forms to use, who are they asking?
Us.
You. When they need to get their appraiser in, who are they asking and coordinating with? You. When they want to do a home inspection, who are they coordinating with? You. Trying to get this thing across the finish line and make sure everything's dialed in and ready for the settlement. You see what I'm saying here? You are doing work. So it's legit to put in there. I'm not going to tell you how much to put in there. I kind of like Dee's. It's like I want to give my clients, the sellers, a discount. And I think it's so easy to say, normally if there is a represented buyer, the typical, there is no industry standard, but the typical is they're looking for 2.5%, 3%, right? Our company wants to show appreciation. I want to show appreciation. And so if that situation arises, we will only charge 1.5. It's so powerful how we say this versus him hawing around and not positioning it as a benefit that you're giving them. Is it a benefit that you're discounting? Yeah, it is. Okay. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well,
all right.
And also, Matt, reviewing it when you go under contract, because the last thing I wanted to do was show up at the closing table with me knowing that that's additional and saying, oh, well, don't you remember back in May? No, I reminded them right now if we need to discuss it or make changes, and they were happy with that. So at the closing table, I felt good.
Yeah. Great final point. So much of everything we do in this business has to do with setting proper expectations.
Yeah.
If the expectations are set, it's usually easy, or at least easier, to navigate whatever comes up. If we just mentally, I've watched agents do this for 2 decades. Well, I'll just delay talking about it if the situation comes up. And the problem is, when the situation does come up, then quite often the client says, well, how come you didn't cover that with me in advance? How come you didn't do this? And you can just feel the frustration almost instantaneous. So get ahead of it. Okay. All right. I wanted to jump in to a couple of really quick things here. I always want to add a little fuel to the fire and equip you with some tools to help. So let me share my screen here. All right. So we all know this screen, right? This is our lovely main page when we log into the MLS. Not anything too terribly exciting here, but the area I want to draw your attention to is, I don't know how you have your widgets set up, but I have the listing alerts. I collapsed that. I have my marketing update widget, and that's helpful information. But the one I want to talk about today is this market statistics one. And the key point here is notice this field. I don't know if you paid attention to this in the last month or two. They changed it so you can use average or median. Now, if you know me at all, which one am I going to advocate to use?
Median.
Median. And why, James? Give me the succinct version of why.
Because it eliminates the effect of outliers, a $10 million sale, or
that's right, a statistical outlier. So I live in Springville, and up the canyon, Hollow Creek Canyon, there's a left-hand fork, and there's some development up there, and my brother has some land up there, and this was driven home. The point was driven home to me yesterday. I rode my bike up to his lot, which was quite the climb. I survived it. But as I'm looking at the vista down at the surrounding properties, there's a property at the end of left-hand fork, if you know the one I'm talking about. It's been listed, and I think maybe even sold. Dan, I don't know if you know this one, but I think it was listed for in excess of $30 million. It's quite the spread, right? What does that one property in Springville do to the average sold price? So I did a screenshot of the two here, and I used the same data. And you can see here's average, right, on the left-hand side. And the days on market were 61. Not a big deal. But if you use median, the median days on market is 42. All right. But which one's more accurate? This is the median, literally means the middle data point, right? If there's 100 data points, this is 0.50. Okay. Now it gets more interesting when you look at, oh, wow, the average list price is 697,000. The median list price is 520,000. Okay. And then you get to the sold 682 versus 515. That can be a big deal when you're competing for a listing, or other side of the coin, when you're talking to a prospective buyer about what the average sales price is versus the median sales price. And we could go into a whole discussion about this, but this is dramatic enough to explain why we want to use this. So coming full circle, when you log into the MLS and you go down to your market statistics widget, which I would, here's the funny thing. These things, every time we log into the MLS, they're sitting there staring us in the face. I mean, it's like, please let me make you a smarter agent, more aware of what's going on. But I think a good chunk of the time we're so busy getting into the MLS, we bypass these. Give yourself 5 minutes each week to just look at these. You can even do different date ranges and be more equipped to answer questions about the market when you're asked. Okay.
Matt,
so
can I just add something else, something that's probably even more relevant in terms of what it does to the statistics is if you're looking at a market area that has, for example, a new condo development, the prices are lower, and they have a bunch of sales, and they frequently report them 10 at a time or in large groups, that can really distort it low. And then on the other hand, if you have a new development, a bunch of new homes that are significantly higher than the average, and they report 10 sales on a day, and anyway, those reportings are typically not done when they actually occur, and they will seriously skew your averages. It doesn't just take a $30 million sale. It can,
right.
There are a whole bunch of factors that can.
Yeah, 100%. So there's two other quick things I wanted to show you. So I'm going to share one more time, share my screen. And actually, so in Rapid Stats, right, in the MLS, you click on the left-hand side, click Rapid Stats, you land on the dashboard. But I wanted to show one other one that I thought was pretty cool. Actually, I need to bring up.
Oh, no, you can. You want to share?
File, open recent files. There we go. That's the one I want. Oh my gosh. Hold on 2 seconds, guys. This is the one I want. Okay, so this is just a representation of what you're seeing here in Rapid Stats, but I wanted to draw on it, so I printed it out. So if you go to supply versus demand by price range, you're going to get all these graphics. And can I just be perfectly honest with you guys? I've gone to Rapid Stats, quote unquote, definition page, and I don't think I could do an adequate job of explaining to you the active listings versus the supply IDX seasonal adjusted numbers, blah, blah, blah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is ignore the first page. It's really not the important one. But if you go down to the second page, think of it this way. If you're going into a listing, let's say the listing, you did a CMA and it's $650,000, right? That's what your CMA is coming in at. It would be very helpful, in my opinion, to go to your client and say, listen, I want to size the market for you. And I think data is helpful in you digesting what we're looking at, right? I could sit there, Dan, and I could talk to him until I'm blue in the face. But there's, even for people who are quote unquote non-analyticals, they can see this and go, oh, I get it. So if you went to this page 2, and you went, here's 2025 data, July of 2025, and here's July of 2024 data. I just want to show you the difference in the market. So back in 2024, in your price range, there were 908 properties. And that equated to 2.5 months, 2.57 months of inventory. Here we are a year later, we have 300 more properties competing with yours, and we have 3.5 months of inventory. Now let's just stop there. Is that a hard discussion to have? Is that a hard thing to show from this graphic? It's not. It's like super easy. All you have to do is print out this form and use Adobe Reader, and you can put, just like I did, the red box around here and highlight the key pieces of data and have that either printed out or digitally available. So when they come up and you have that discussion of, well, Matt, where should I price my house at? I want to put it at $725,000, right? I would turn around and say, hey, can I share something with you? Please don't be offended, because the data is so important for you to understand where we are, because I want us to be successful. I want you to get moved into your new house, whatever their rationale is. I'm going to put it in the context of what's in it for them, but I'm going to tie it back to data, right? Data is kind of important stuff. And I would turn around and say, although I would love to get you $725,000 for your house, one, I have a CMA based on recent sales that says it's worth $659 or whatever the number is. And in that price range, our competition has gone up, I don't know, 33% in the past year, from 900 to 1,200. And the months of inventory has gone up from 2.57 months of inventory to 3.46. So when we understand that, can you see how it would be a bad strategy to overprice? There's too much competition on the market. And what I don't want to have happen, and here's the final nail in the coffin, is if we go too far, right, overpriced, then your house, we all know this dialogue, starts to become stigmatized. If it's a good property, the agents out there representing buyers know it moves fast. If it sits out there for more than the norm, then all of a sudden people start to think, what is wrong with the property? Doesn't mean something's wrong with it, but perception does become part of our reality. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Hey, if it made sense to Shane, then we are golden. We are golden.
I just want to know why, like, even a dummy can understand this, and then you immediately thought of my name. Is there a correlation between that?
Dan, it's called a litmus test. I'm just saying. All right. The last thing I wanted to talk about on the stats front, and then we'll move on. What I wanted to cover today is some of the pitfalls considerations on seller financing. It's been 2 years since we did a deep dive on that, and I'm starting to see more of it. And so I wanted to cover that. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was, how many of you have been hit with the price per square foot is X? Come on, raise your hands. Don? How well do you like it when somebody brings up? Well, you and I were talking. Ironically, you and I were talking about this last week in Ogden. How well do you like that when a client brings up price per square foot?
I don't like it at all because it's not a very good true measuring stick.
Is it a reality in our? Do we have to deal with it?
Yes, we do have to deal with it.
Yeah,
As you and I talked, I just dealt with it last week.
yeah. Melissa, you raised your hand. You get this right.
Yeah,
How
I'm fighting it. Bad.
Good. Say that again.
Oh, I was just saying I'm fighting one just like that right now so bad. And he just keeps zoning back to the square foot. And well, I'm seeing this. And so I'm really glad you're going to talk about it because I need help on how to help him see that's not a good measuring stick.
It's one thing for us to know it's a pretty bad stat, but the real magic happens when we can actually help them understand why it's bad. Now, Dan, as much as I pick on Dan because he's a friend, he's also a former lender and appraiser. And so, Dan, give me your 30-second view of price per square foot.
So price per foot is handy in one scenario. In one scenario, when you have a similar location with a very similar finish and a similar builder, like Edge Homes or Ivory Homes. If Ivory built the Jenny floor plan and there's two of them and they happen to sell within a few months of each other, like, boy, that actually is a decent measure to like say, okay, well, they sold for $100 a foot and mine is similar, blah, blah, blah. That's good. The problem with square foot, like as a price per square foot as far as valuation tool, is it doesn't take into account the size of the lot, or if there's 2-car garages, or the finishes within the home. Like it only is a dumb, like this one's that big, this one's this big, therefore they are similar. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And then also, as we know, like within any given neighborhood, often the biggest home in a neighborhood will sell for the lowest number on a price per square foot metric, whereas the smallest home will probably sell on the highest number. So if you went in and had a really big home and you're comparing it to a really small home in the same neighborhood, same builder, even if it's in the same time frame, that small home is going to have a high number on a price per square foot metric, and that really won't be a good correlator or good values tool to say like, oh, the big home then therefore is worth X. So there's just so many assumptions taken in with just raw square footage numbers that it's not a great indicator of value.
Yeah, well put. So listen, a word of caution. Let's not go out and beat the public up for their ignorance, right? When they say, well, wait a minute, the price per square foot on this is this. You know, I don't know if you have relatives from Texas or whatever, but just learn in your head to say, oh, bless your heart, not out loud, in your head, bless your heart. And I joke about that, but I'm kind of serious. For me, that literally is a reset for me to like have a little grace and mercy, bless your heart. I can't help it that you're ignorant and don't work in this space all the time and don't really understand the pitfalls of price per square foot. Dan hit on some of them. I'm going to throw a couple of additional ones out there. So in a tract home, we don't have a lot of tract homes in Utah. I grew up in Southern California when they put 500 homes in at a time and there was like 2 models. Those are tract homes, right? But think of your commodity builders, you know, that do larger developments and they have repeats of certain properties. You could have a 3,000 square foot Rambler, same exact floor plan, on a 0.20 acre lot, both facing the same direction, right? And the value could be totally different, but price per square foot could be the same. Why? Oh, well, does price per square foot take into consideration a basement that's finished? No, it's taking the square footage. It's taking the sales price, right, and dividing it by the square footage. But if one did have a basement and you saw the price per square foot, then a seller could be saying, or conversely, the buyer could be saying, but wait a minute, this one, exact same model, right down the street, facing the same direction, built the same year on the same size lot sold for this, so my price per square foot should be the same. Well, no, because your basement's not finished, or your basement, you both have basements, but yours has a theater room and a full kitchen and a walkout, and none of those things get taken into consideration when people throw around price per square foot. So Melissa, to your point, with a client, I think a general approach would be is like, hey, listen, we don't fault people for using that as a ballpark metric, but it is flawed. And if I could just give you a few reasons why, right? Like Dan said, quality of finish, size of the lot, year built. I mean, you could go on and on. Swimming pool. Swimming pool. What if there's a swimming pool? Is that considered in price per square foot? No, it is not. Right? So even if you have to be a little melodramatic in explaining to them why, because they're pulling their data from somewhere, and somewhere is just getting price per square foot without all these considerations we talked about. And then you're getting it second, third hand going, well, my data says price per square foot is this. And so now listen, the key is once you tell them that their metric isn't good, you better have an alternative. Nature hates a void. It will fill a void. So you better have the right metric to fill in to show them, right, what a more appropriate metric is. Maybe walk them through how you do a CMA, right? Not in nauseating detail, but just the framework of what we actually go through in creating a CMA. And so I think the conclusion on that would be, so although I don't fault you, Melissa's client, for, grasping at a straw, no, don't say that, and doing price per square foot, we predominantly don't use that in the space, nor do appraisers, because it's just not a great metric. Here's how we establish value and show them. Okay.
Matt?
Yeah.
James, can I just add? I know agents that have been around for 40 years that will talk a lot about price per square foot. So I think not only do we need to be able to talk about it in a different way, but we also need to be able to react to what other agents might talk to clients about. And I think I know some of them really well that are good agents that will talk a lot about that, but in their mind, they're narrowing down to a very specific type of property, but probably aren't communicating that to their clients, to the public, when they're talking about price per square foot. They're in effect creating a CMA in their head. So I guess my point is know that there are a lot of agents that have been around for a long time that is a major driver for them.
Yeah. So it's a great point. And I would just say this would be like if Matt Barton's still doing production day to day, I'd be geeked up to run across an agent like that, because I'm like, ooh, I just got them disqualified because I'm going to show them that their approach isn't super intelligent. And I'm not faulting them. Sometimes they just fall into a rut and it's fast. And but if I'm competing with them, man, of course I'm going to use that against them, right? And then Melissa, last thing, to Dan's point, if we're talking about condos, it's even with a condo, it's still not great because fit and finish can impact the price per square foot. But that's where it's at least more intelligent, right? Because we have 300 units that are all 3-bedroom, 2-bath condos in the same complex. First floor, second floor, third floor, there might be a little variation there, but we're at least in the ballpark with price per square foot in a commodity sell. But a lot of what we do is not a commodity sell. Okay. Woohoo. All right. So let's get into it. How many of you have in the past 6 months, 12 months, run across a buyer or on a listing that you have somebody who wants to do seller financing? Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down a list of questions here. I'm just going to rapid fire these. So first one is, why do buyers want it? What's the motivation? Why? Why don't they just go to the local credit union, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and just get a loan? Why do they insist on doing freaking seller finance? What's going on here?
Lower interest rate. They want the interest rate the seller has.
Oh, so they want an assumable.
They don't qualify for a loan.
There's the big one, Don. Good one, Janelle. You're right. They do. They see a 3% mortgage rate and figure that they can get a better rate because of that underlying mortgage. But I think a lot of it too is, to Don's point, is they may have a bankruptcy in the recent past. They may have gone through a divorce and don't qualify. There's a lot of reasons financially why they could do it, right? Or request it. Some people are just cheap, to Janelle's point. I could get a 6% rate, but I know that Savannah has her mortgage at 3%, and man, I could come in and pay her a point higher, and I don't have to pay 4%. Yeah. Okay.
I just went through this with, he's actually a realtor and he wants to purchase from my sellers. And that's his thing. He's like, well, I want a $3,000 a month payment, and I'm going to pay your sellers the interest instead of the bank.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to get to that a little more in detail, Janelle. So thanks for sharing that. Why do sellers sometimes advertise it, and sometimes why are they okay with it when a buyer presents it? What's their motivation? Is there any reason for a seller to take seller financing?
Sure. I mean, maybe they can get a higher price if they finance some of the, some of the purchase. There could be tax consequences for selling now, whereas seller financing might change a scenario. There's a bunch of reasons why a seller might want to do it. Maybe they're landlords and they're sick and tired of collecting every month, and they want somebody else to manage it, but their take on the property goes down a little bit, but they still get it. They're still in the income game.
Difficult to sell property.
Say that again, James.
Difficult to sell property.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask these questions because sometimes I think we just think of this from just such a narrow point of view, but James and Dan articulated a number of reasons why a seller could consider it. Okay. The next question I have is it legal? And close cousin to it, is it ethical? Nobody's willing to chime in.
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Is it legal? Is it ethical? Dan says yes and yes. Anybody choose to disagree?
I agree with Dan.
I partially disagree with Dan.
Just as a standard default, or on this specific thing?
Yeah, yes and yes.
Well, if there's a mortgage in place, you always have to address the potential of a due on sale clause being activated.
Thank you. That is why I partially disagreed with Dan, because he left the door open and didn't button it down. And this is from experience. I've watched some agents. So listen, we have a number of fiduciaries. What is the translation for a fiduciary to our client? A legal obligation or responsibility. Emphasis on legal, not just a nicety, right? I hear agents talk about our fiduciaries as if they can just come and go. It's like, no, when you're signed as a licensee and you represent a client, you literally have legal responsibilities. Translation, you could lose your license, or you could be sued if damages ensued from you not upholding your fiduciaries. So this is a big deal. We don't talk about it a lot, but we should, right? So one of our biggest, probably the biggest umbrella fiduciary is known as reasonable care. Reasonable care. And to Joyce's point, we're all licensed individuals. We all have a lot of experience and practice, and we have access to brokers who, if we don't know something, we should be asking them. So if somebody engages in seller financing, we're like, yeah, cool, let's do it, right? Without any word of caution, any word of, hey, here's some things to look out for. I would dare say you just perhaps breached your fiduciary of reasonable care. And Joyce brought up a simple example. Has anybody in the last 20 years seen a deed of trust at closing that does not have a due on sale clause? Liar. Dan.
Sure.
Okay.
FHA and VAs, they don't have a single, or they don't have due on sale clauses.
Somebody fact check, man. If somebody use Chat GPT while we're talking and see if they do. The issue here is when you sign a deed of trust, I mean, it's in the name, right? A deed of trust. You're saying whoever is signing the document, agree to pay back the lender. And there's a reasonable expectation for the lender to say, yes, Matt, you're going to be paying me. Not John Metcalf. Although, John, if you ever want to make my mortgage payment, feel free. I'm happy to allow you to do that. But
Google Gemini doesn't think they do. They said no, traditional VA loans do not typically contain a due on sale clause. Yada yada yada. I'm out.
I just
so
I just chat
hold on.
GPT'd
We're
it.
not done with that, Dan. We are not done with that.
I just chat
I'm
GPT'd
going
it.
to come back to that and blacklisting agents who participate on a transfer of ownership without going through the process, right? A change of ownership, meaning seller finance. FHA does have provisions against that, whether they officially call that a due on sale clause or not. You cannot transfer ownership.
Matt, Grok says that yes, a VA mortgage typically includes a due on sale clause.
See, Grok's way better because that's Elon Musk's.
Oh, geez, here we
And
go.
so does chat GPT.
So 2 out of 3 AIs say it does.
Right.
So Dan, Gemini misled you. Okay.
Google runs the world. We all know who's right here.
All right. So listen, what I just said is actually true. If you, I wish I know I have this saved on my hard drive, but there are provisions within FHA VA that if we as practitioners facilitate, help, change ownership on an FHA VA loan without FHA VA's approval, we can be blacklisted from ever doing FHA loans again. Did you know that? That's a really big one. So let's just let that marinate for a minute.
Wait, will you repeat that statement again?
Oh, I'll be happy to repeat it. FHA and VA loans, right, have obviously more restriction. They're a little more involved. Let's say it that way, right? We know we've got an FHA VA addendum, but the administration of FHA VA loans have rules, and one of the rules, and maybe next time we go around, I'll have researched it and bring it back up. But I ran into this situation and got into this in detail. But it basically says that if we as practitioners, as a brokerage, as an agent, if we facilitate doing seller financing on a FHA VA loan without FHA VA's approval, which would mean typically an assumption of a loan, then we can be blacklisted from ever participating in FHA VA loans in the future. That's a big deal, right? Yeah. So that's kind of called a no-fly zone. Don't go there. Okay, so in normal situations, and according to Grok and Chat, not Gemini, there are due on sale clauses. What is the cursory description of a due on sale clause? What does it mean? Wow.
When it gets sold, they have to pay the loan in full, right? Like the mortgage has to be paid off.
Yep. So, all of these deeds of trust have verbiage in there to some degree or another that say, hey, listen, I, as the lender, made a deal with you. Our deed of trust says you're going to pay me back because you will be the owner until it's paid off. You can't transfer the ownership to somebody else without my approval. And if you do change ownership, we have the right as the lender, because we didn't make a deal with them. We made a deal with you. We did a background check on you. We did, right? We took a calculated risk with you, and now you're transferring it to somebody else without us knowing. If we find out about that, we have contractual rights to call the note due, and you have 30 days to pay off the note in full. Wow. Could be a big deal. Okay. Now, it's kind of interesting because my first question, if somebody what agent calls me now and says, hey, have somebody who wants to do seller finance. First question I'm going to ask is, does the seller own it outright or not? Right? It's the first logical question. If they own it outright, then we don't have to worry about due on sale clause. There's not a lender that could be put in jeopardy. The seller can do what they want. So that's going to be the first question. I would suggest that's your first question, right? Do you own the property outright, or is there still a mortgage on it? Because if there's a mortgage, the deed of trust probably has due on sale clause. And they're going to be like a heebie-jeeba what? And you're like, a due on sale clause. And since we've talked about it now, we're going to just roll off the tongue. Oh, if we did transfer ownership to somebody else by way of seller financing, then they have the right to call the note due. And typically you have 30 days to pay them the loan amount in full. Do you have $400,000 at the ready in case that happens? The answer is typically no, we don't.
Well, and Matt,
Yeah.
this is where using an escrow company helps to mediate the potential of the lender becoming alarmed, but it still is not a fail-safe approach. But I would never do a seller financing without requiring seller and buyer to sign on and agree to use an escrow company to receive, to record, to make the payment, to send acknowledgement back, to track all the payments.
Yeah. So let's get into it. I'm going to pull this up on screen so that we can see the actual seller finance addendum in all of its color. So here it is, right? Now, I like to read at least the first part. Notice that this whole first section, let me use my lovely drawing tool here, this section right here, it's in bold. Now, before I even get into that, let's go all the way to the bottom. Whose form is this? It's not UAR's form. It's one of the 6 or 7 that the DRE actually puts out, the Division of Real Estate for the state of Utah, right? This is their form. So let me just pause for a minute. We are given permissions by the Division of Real Estate, who gives us our licensure, right, to fill in forms, fill in blanks in forms, not be realtors at law, right? Pretend attorneys who take a blank addendum and start writing seller finance terms. Over many years of discussions with the DRE, the general mindset of the DRE when it comes to complaints and sanctioning licenses of realtors is, if we have a form for it, you better be using it. Or you better have an attorney writing up whatever else you choose to use. If you do it yourself, you're screwed. They don't use that term, but that's what they say, really. You're screwed. So just remember, this is the DRE's form. So my second question when an agent calls me and says, I received an offer, seller finance, after I ask the first question, which is, does your seller own it outright or not? The second question is, what form is being used? Is it the DRE seller financing addendum? If it's not, my next line is going to be, well, then your seller really should get an attorney to look at it because we don't know what's contained in there. And I'm not an attorney, so I can't definitively say whether it's a good contract or not. This form by the DRE was approved by an attorney. Do you know what who the attorney was? It was the Attorney General for the state of Utah. So I don't know, he has a little bit of street cred. All right. What does the first paragraph say? Seller financing is what? A complex transaction governed by many state and federal laws. Real estate brokers are not qualified nor licensed to what? To ensure that the terms of this seller financing addendum comply with these laws. Buyer and seller are strongly advised to carefully consult with a legal professional. Man, I love it when we have strong disclosure language at the front end of something, because if our seller goes forward after we demonstrate our fiduciary of reasonable care, I don't know, maybe even read this paragraph together with them. If they choose to go forward and things get a little squirrely and sideways down the road, This is a very nice fallback position because the first question that would be asked in any form of litigation or investigation would be, did you consult a legal professional? If so, who and what did they have to say? It's a very quick redirect, taking the responsibility off us as a brokerage and you as a licensee. So if for no other reason, use this seller finance addendum versus somebody else because of that first paragraph. Okay. I don't want to be too melodramatic, but that is a big freaking deal, that opening paragraph. Okay. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts. So, all right. So this is a seller financing addendum tied to the real estate purchase contract. That's what the next line says. Then the section 1 is the credit documents. The credit documents. It feels like it's a misnomer, but think of it in the context of seller financing. What document is going to capture the credit being offered from the seller to the buyer in the terms of seller financing? So notice the options here. We have a note and deed of trust, a note and all-inclusive deed of trust, and then other. What would be an other? Well, first of all, note and deed of trust. That's your traditional. That's what when we go to a closing and Bank of America or American First Credit Union or anybody else issues a mortgage, we really don't have mortgages. You guys know this, right? That's kind of an East Coast term. Pretty much anything west of the Mississippi is a note and a deed of trust. We still refer to it as a mortgage, but it's really not. And the note are the financial terms, and the deed of trust is basically all the provisions that say how this is going to be handled, and if you don't, here's what could happen. So the first option is kind of your traditional one that we're used to seeing. And the second one, what does that mean? A note and all-inclusive deed of trust. Anybody want to take a stab at that one? Nobody. No takers. Man. All right. Has anybody heard the term rap? And no, I don't mean Tupac or I don't know any current rappers. So what does it mean to have a rap? It's the same thing. Note and all-inclusive deed of trust is also known as a wrap. What does that actually mean? So you have your original mortgage. Think of a seller who does have a mortgage and he wants to engage in seller financing, but he doesn't have enough money to pay off the mortgage, nor does the buyer. So what are they going to do? They're going to wrap their new financial terms around the original mortgage. That's why they call it all-inclusive or a wrap, okay? And that's the very thing that we've been talking about to be concerned about with a due on sale clause. Let's pause there for a second. I've had this discussion more than I care to admit with not only people's clients, but agents and even brokers. And my favorite one is when I get a broker who's, I don't know, been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, or whatever the case, and I get some version D of them saying, Barton, why are you being such a stickler? We've done these forever, and the due on sale clause is not an issue. It's never been an issue. Is that solid logic? Yeah. It's not. That's like saying because I drive like an idiot and haven't had a crash yet, that means I will never have a crash. Well, that's just stupid logic. It just means the clock is still ticking and the time is running out. I'm eventually going to crash. All right. So everybody, if you weren't in the industry in 2007, 2008, we experienced what we call the Great Recession, the biggest financial retraction in generations. Okay. And as a result of that, I'm giving you a quick rehearsal of history. The government got into buying mortgage-backed securities, which artificially kept interest rates down for a decade or so. That's why everybody got spoiled by 2.5%, 3.5% money. Okay. And so that the interest rate that Bank of America, I'm going to keep using them as an example, that is the rate that they were issuing money at. Okay. So pretty hard for them to make the case if somebody did seller back then during that 10-year period, that if they did seller financing and instead of going into default and then Bank of America having to foreclose and take the property back and do repairs and all those other things, they were just kind of like, okay, cool. We're not going to raise the issue, even though we have due on sale clause verbiage, right? Because all they could do is after all those expenses of taking it through foreclosure, $10,000 for the attorney, $20,000 in repairs, another $30,000 for the brokerage to market and sell it and pay for a buyer's. They're like, let's let sleeping dogs lie. Let's just let somebody keep paying until some future date. Okay.
Matt, plus writing a new mortgage at the same rate.
Correct. Thank you. And yes, I'm doing all of that to reissue the money at 3.5% money, because for 10 years, that's where the rates hovered at, right? All right. Where are rates today? 6.5%? Yeah, 6.5%. Does anybody in their right mind, if you were the CEO of Bank of America and you're beholden to stockholders and the New York Stock Exchange, and every quarter you have to show profitability, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, we have 10 million loans issued in the United States. I'm pretty sure 5 to 10% of those may be engaged in some form of seller financing. What if, bear with me, you guys are my board of directors, bear with me, I have an idea. Why don't we create a department in the day and age of big data and see if who's paying the utilities has changed, to see if there is, I don't know, a change of county records, if a lot of different ways to determine if there's potentially a change in ownership. And if 5 to 10% of 10 million loans, so 500,000 loans, somebody got a calculator, do 500,000 loans at $650,000. What's that number? Come on.
It's about almost 4,500 billion. That's just off the top of my head.
I got $325 billion.
Okay.
A third of $1 trillion, and then multiply that, Dan, times an increase of 3% per year. So how much money would they be making?
And important is that exactly 0% of them are underwater.
A boatload.
You got a number for me, Dan?
3% on top of 325 is 335, 750. So trillion.
So if we took, just take $350 billion.
Yeah, so 3% of that is going to be
times 0.03.
It's 9.75 billion per year.
Yeah. They would be making $9.75 billion more per year. Huh. Bear with me. I don't know.
And it compounds.
Do you think we might set up a department in Bank of America to start looking at these? And that broker who's such a genius and says, we've done this for the past 10 years and it's never been a problem. My office managers will tell you my favorite saying is, it's never a problem until it's a problem. So I think I beat that horse to death. Just because they haven't come after due on sale in the past is not a good strategy for saying it won't happen in the future. I promise you it will happen. I've seen it already start to happen. So don't get caught in that trap. Okay. All right. On section 1, the other document I would just say is of concern. It's more on the buyer side as a concern. How many of you have heard of contract for deed? Contract for deed. So contract for deed basically says, if you're familiar with Jack's Petty and Liberty Title in Salt Lake, he even runs CE courses on this, how to do seller finance using contract for deed. He's one of 2 title companies in the state of Utah that I'm aware of that will even do this. Why? Because title companies are litigation averse. They don't want to get involved in litigation. And contract for deed is highly vulnerable to litigation. Here's why. In a contract for deed, if Don is my seller and Shane is the buyer, Shane signs up and says, hey, yeah, you know what? I'm going to give you, $50,000 down. I'm going to make payments at this rate, blah, blah, blah. When I finally pay Don off, I will get the deed. As soon as I fulfill the contract, which means all of the payments, then I will get the deed. Now, wait a minute. Who's the owner? Who's the owner in that situation? Is Don still the owner or is Shane the owner? Because it says contract, then deed, contract for deed. Who's the owner? Trick question. You have to remember in the state of Utah, there are 2 types of title. Legal title, which was what Don would be, and equitable title, which is what Shane would have. He has a legal instrument that allows him to have ownership if he fulfills the terms of that instrument. And here's the crazy thing, even equitable title has ownership rights in the state of Utah. So don't think this is a way to get around the due on sale clause. It is still a change of ownership, not complete ownership, but it doesn't say that in the due on sale clause. It just says a transfer of ownership. It could be
even if Don has a better mustache than me, the Tom Selleck stash.
He does, but you have a better beard. So
I'm in the game.
All right. Here's the problem with contract for deed. And this is why title companies, as a general rule, will run from them. Can you imagine a scenario where Shane does this deal with Don? He comes into the house, he completely redoes the landscaping. I mean, it is to the nines. I mean, lighting, everything. People are like, damn, he did a great job with that house. He dumped like $80,000 into the landscaping rocks and sprinkler systems and water features and lighting. And he finished the basement. He dumped another $80,000 into the basement. And then he hits a hard time and he doesn't make his payment to Don. Contract for deed does not have provisions for foreclosure. It doesn't give you a notice of default period, a chance for remedy. If Shane doesn't pay, Don can very rapidly say, you violated the terms of our contract. I'm taking the property back. Peace out. Thanks for the landscaping. Thanks for the finished basement. How happy is Shane going to be about that? How quickly is Shane going to lawyer up and be like, I got $80,000 in landscaping. I got $80,000 in the basement. There's $160,000. Not only that, I think this guy isn't actually executing the contract the way it has a high probability of litigation. I'm not saying who's going to win, but I have seen case law where on contract for deed where they come back and said, yeah, not so fast, Mr. Seller. Shane is entitled to X, Y, and Z. He may not get everything back, but he might get some of it back. This is why title companies run pretty quickly from contract for deed. So, wow, we're going to have to speed up because that was section 1 and we're out of time. I'm going to rapidly hit the others and then we're going to be done. If you want my marked up document, like I always say, send me an email. I will be happy to send you a copy. Here are the last things. There is a term called the creating party. Who's going to create the note and deed of trust or the all-inclusive deed or the contract for deed or anything else? Whoever originates that becomes the contracting party, and it can be either the seller or the buyer. There's like a due diligence period on that. If you're the non-creating party, right? If you get the documents, like, great, set up a contract for deed, but it needs to have provisions to protect me, and it comes back and it doesn't. You're at your sole discretion, meaning the non-creating party, you can cancel the contract because you don't like the instrument that's going to be used. But barring that, if you don't resolve the objections, then we're going to go forward. Then there's the section on credit terms. How much is going to be paid, principal, interest payment, a balloon payment. That's how a lot of seller financing is. Really quick note here. To me, it's just my opinion, the seller financing doesn't make sense in the long term for a seller, right? And here's why. Again, if you're Bank of America, you got a million loans and one of them defaults, how damaged is your business? Not very much at all. If you're a seller and you got your property and the one you're seller financing, and there is a note on it, and the seller or the buyer stops paying, does that create a problem for you financially? Yeah, you don't. Your risk is not spread out over a million properties. It's 50% of your property pool. It's a big deal, and I just love it when I see credit terms where they're offering to pay less interest rate than the current rate of 6.5%. It's like, I'm taking on more risk than Bank of America. It shouldn't be 6.5. It should be 9.5, 12.5. That's the way it used to be with seller financing, but we see some crazy things these days, but just be aware of that, okay? Then, of course, you have late payment, prepayment, taxes and assessment. And this is to Joyce's point earlier. If you are going to go down this path, the story I use where I live, the house I live in right now, back in 2008, a builder came in and built like 6 homes. And they were nice homes. And he couldn't sell them, so he ended up renting them all out, right? And people are paying pretty good rent on those houses. And next thing you know, saw people moving out one by one, like, what's going on? Oh, we got foreclosed on. Landlord was just taking the rent, even though he knew he was going into foreclosure, didn't let us know. And now the bank showed up and said, they're now the owners and we need to get out. So just be aware that you really should be using somebody like escrow specialist or some place like that if you're going to do seller financing, so that there is a party dedicated to saying, yes, the buyer paid this amount, and we in turn, instead of the seller, made the payment to the mortgage holder. It's a way to fireproof at least that portion of the deal. So important to lay out what the late payment or prepayment amounts are, who's going to pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And we already beat this to death, the due on sale clause. There's some very strong verbiage in here. That's what I have highlighted. Important for your clients to read that. Yeah.
Matt, let me really quickly, I know you're out of time, but regarding Dan's question about VA and FHA, with the VA or FHA and they're assumable, that's got to be, the first part is the assumption, and then the second part is that the seller ends up in second position.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you do a VA loan, right, and you know, I've got 2 sons active in the Army. I know other people on the call have people in the Army, or sorry, in the defense industry. As a veteran, you have access to one loan. If you do seller finance on a VA, which again has some issues, you don't get to use that again on another property. Yours is tied up on the one that's currently being seller financed. And if
well, that's what I'm saying, that have to be assumed.
Right. And if it becomes an assumed, then it's no longer seller finance, right?
Yeah, so you end up in second position. Seller ends up in second position. That was my point.
Well, I think on seller, if it's an assumable, once the assumption is done, right, then that becomes the buyer's loan, because they have to go through the qualification process,
right,
and the original seller is out of the loop. So
right, and then the remainder would be a second loan, second position. Yeah.
So the remainder of these, I'm not saying these aren't important, but the buyer's disclosures, right, and the right to do a credit report and all those things are covered. I'll just say this, the DRE's seller finance addendum is pretty replete, pretty thorough, covers the majority of the things that we should take into consideration when doing seller financing. So my final comment to wrap up on is, if you have a listing, because this is usually when it surfaces, and it's usually in a scenario where, well, my house hasn't sold and I'm getting towards the end of my listing, we got this seller finance offer from a buyer, and I really want to make it happen. Translation, I need a paycheck, I need a commission, so I'm willing to throw caution to the wind. Check yourself, take a step back, make sure to bare minimum they're using the DRE seller financing addendum. And I say this all the time. If you run across seller finance, please, please, please talk to your broker. If they have a challenge with it, I promise you they'll loop me in. And if it gets above our pay grade, we will get an attorney involved. It is a viable path, but you need to proceed with a little bit of caution so that you don't get your butt in a sling. Okay? That's the technical term, butt in a sling. That's known as bias. Butt in a sling, bias, huh? Like that. All right, listen, you guys have a great week. I appreciate you being on the call. I hope that was helpful information from the stats to keep you current and with some dialogues to chat both with your sellers and buyers, and so that you can deal with seller financing when it rears its head and not be afraid of it. Just proceed intelligently and with caution. Okay? Have a good week. See you guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.